of attrition or whatever is tied to it, that leapfrog for whatever reason and so forth, whatever definition of leapfrogging is, and who need the stuff or whatever it is, resources, then. And we have to be able to be in a position to act accordingly.
And one would hope that that's why I mentioned having an implementation line as opposed to within the buildings, having lines for books and materials. That covers that sort of thing. So that you're not excluding everybody else because you're pumping all your resources here. They simply are getting a lion's share for implementation, but the other disciplines still have their usual access points for materials, upgrades, etc. Okay? Make sense? Sometimes I don't always make sense. Other questions or comments?
I'll clarify. No, the calendar that Steve put together for the teachers to follow has all of them. It's got math, English, science, social studies. So if they're working on it, everybody's working on it. It's just that math and language arts need the first go at it. So.
Anyone else? Yes, sir. Oh, ma'am, I'm sorry. I saw a hand and I saw this gentleman's face.
Lisa Treeberry. So I'm trying to understand what it means specifically that there's not a curriculum in place. Because I know that teachers are teaching and they're producing beautiful work and children are engaged, but I guess I'm just missing the piece. Like, what does this mean to the students itself, college readiness, being attracted to colleges? That's what I'm not getting in this. And what, when I see an implementation for 2015 in April or May, and maybe I misunderstood that, my son is going to be mid-sophomore year. He's going to be looking clearly at colleges by then. Why would I want to keep my kids in this district? Like, what would be beneficial at this point, knowing what I know, that I would want my kids to stay in this district? Because I could just pull them out and send them to places that have clearly defined curriculums, and I know what to expect.
Well, I think I will answer, and then I'll try this. It isn't that there isn't curriculum.
Right.
There are. And it isn't that individual teachers have not been updating the subjects that they teach. The problem is we don't have a clearly articulated K-12 program, to use mathematics, that's horizontally and vertically aligned. So there are pieces, they may be slightly out of sync with one another. That doesn't mean that what is being taught isn't up to date. But when you look at that, if you walk into a school and let me see the school's curriculum in A, you're going to say, but this is from 2008. What's happened in the last 6 years? Where is it reflected? And we're relying on the individual teacher to do that updating. We should have a more systematic way to guarantee that every curriculum has that vertical and horizontal articulation and is addressing current standards, quite candidly. And I think that's where it's fallen behind. It isn't that it hasn't been done, but it's been kind of left to the teacher to work on that individually, and I don't think that's a proper way to do it. I'll turn to Mr. Strand and Dr. Iacobelli.
There's a lot of fragmentation, and we're looking for coherence, alignment. There hasn't been a systematic or a systemic review and alignment for quite a while. But in the absence of that, certainly Connecticut has had standards for decades, and teachers have had a lot of experience. And as Bill said, people are, revising and doing it on their own. So we have a lot of gaps and redundancies. And over the past year and a half, as we've been able to come together and look at what are we doing horizontally as well as vertically, we realize that, across the same grade level, different things are happening. And when we go from grade level to grade level, we're covering this material 3 times, and there are other things that are being missed. So we're trying to wrap our hands around it to make sure that we have coherence and that there's alignment and that there's progressions of learning that make sense, and that we have a guaranteed viable curriculum, and that any child coming to the East Adams School District knows they're going to have a similar experience that's going to bring them, to the graduation point, college and career ready. And it won't be by happenstance or by coincidence. It will be, intentional and clearly articulated in curriculum documents. What we're teaching, the standards, how we're assessing kids' progress towards what it is we want them to learn. What are the resources that we have across the district so that there's equity and parity, and opportunities for teachers to come together and look at student work and have conversations about how effective are we and where do we need to make those adjustments in real time. So those are some of the things that we're moving toward in terms of curriculum development.
Commissioner Gugliotti, I know that there is no common core standard for special education. What is the district doing to address that at all district schools?
Well,
I just want to say that the standards are the standards for all
Correct.
kids.
Correct.
So we want the same for our special ed students as we want for every other child. And then the challenge for us comes, how do we change our adult practice and accommodate students' needs? So the standards are the standards for all kids, and we don't have different
Are
standards
there
just
additional
because of.
assessment tools that you're looking at to implement and to purchase?
Certainly, we look at benchmark assessments, and a lot of that conversation and those decisions are made within the planning and placement team meeting specific to a child's needs, and that plan should articulate exactly what is modified and what is accommodated, what accommodations are put in place so that that child is successful. Years ago, when the state determined that all students would take the same state assessment, initially special ed students were allowed to take off-year testing. So if you were in 6th grade, you could take the 4th grade CMT. And they've said, there's really not any truth in reporting. We need to be able to test our special ed students against the same benchmarks as every other and be honest in terms of where they are. And if there is a gap, it's our job to close that gap. So we do watch that very carefully, and there are benchmark assessments and
I
monitoring.
agree with the PPT place that discussion should happen, but there are many families, and I've come across people here in district, administrations and teachers, they're not willing to have that conversation, that cut those meetings short. So I want to know, is there something being done at the district level in this committee to address how you're going to assess the progress of students that have an IEP or a project?
well, it starts with a baseline notion of a Tier 1 curriculum.
Absolutely.
Because interventions are predicated on where students fall within the context of that Tier 1 curriculum and the standard level of expectation associated with that. So this in itself, and aligning IEPs to definitive standards rather than these broad assertions, example, needs reading support on an IEP. Don't really know what that means.
Exactly, it needs to be
So,
very specific
absolutely.
and goal
And so that's,
measurable.
absolutely.
And I feel that myself, my own experience here in districts, in this district, I've had a lot of trouble at a PPT meeting trying to get these answers.
Can't speak to that, but it could certainly speak to the aspect of.
What is the district going to do for assessment for students?
Well, first of all, we're looking at normed, standards-based assessments that we can use as our intervention, to initiate our intervention practices. Not only does that build a bridge for us in terms of allowing teachers to become acclimated with the standards, but it provides the data in real time right now to get an understanding about where students fall within that continuum of learning.
Right.
So we're in the process, we're having a vendor come in on the 28th
Okay.
to deal with that, and we actually had to convince the vendor, first time in my career.
Will that be shared with all teachers or just special ed teachers?
No, it's not, it's a reg ed
Okay.
process, just like SRBI.
Teachers that have been a part of this process.
Teachers have been a part of the process in terms of the decision-making in terms of which vendors and so forth, and we'll move that to the general faculties when this person comes
Thank
in.
you.
But it is predicated on the Monday through Friday function. And so, we can learn as much as we can in terms of what the assessment's telling us, but it's always the response to that, to the data that's most important.
Absolutely, I agree wholeheartedly.
I'm sorry, can you explain who's coming in and what it is?
Northwest Education Association, NWEA, is coming in. And essentially, they're the 1,000-pound elephant in the room
Right.
in terms of the data people. They've been in business for a generation, and well before this whole, computer processing and so forth came into play. And, again, they do a bang-up job with their stuff. I have familiarity with it. Dr. Iacobelli does, and so did some of the teachers on, that we brought into.
Why didn't they want to come in?
They didn't feel we had the structures. They don't need us. We're a small fish.
Right.
So it was through deliberate, literally, providing a picture to convince them that we would have the conditions available for them to be able to
So they were
work
saying,
with us.
you're not ready for us.
Yes.
And it all goes back to the fact that teachers don't have time to, it's what we can give teachers a curriculum, give them the assessments, but they need time to continually go back to what the results are yielding, how they're gonna use those results to change instruction in the classroom, whether or not the curriculum's working within the classroom, etc.
Hey, this is my mantra to the folks from NWA was simply, when they come in and there's a PD piece associated with this, it has to be tied to teaming structures, and it has to be, first of all, it has to be tied with how to be a team and how to read data and go through that process and so forth. We're in essentially an era of data deluge. It's almost, akin to drinking from a fire hose. And we need teachers to be able to not just get the data, but to use it productively. And that takes, becoming and formulating teaming structures takes time. And first and foremost, more than anything else, it takes teams to meet. And so, in fact, Kathy, you were part of the group. You want to speak about it in any way, shape, or form? 30 seconds or less?
No pressure.
I was daydreaming.
Well, how about just about the product in general?
It looked, some aspects of it were user-friendly, but other aspects it was gonna take some time to learn, and a lot of that is the results. We're gonna be like, what do we do with all of this? So a lot of it is here's the test, and we can administer the test, and that'll be great, and then we get the results, but then where do we go from there? It's like, how do we, differentiate according to, well, this child is in the same class and he scores here, and the other one's up here, and then how do we bridge that gap? And that's where a lot of the discussion is going to come.
Those are conversations that should be basis regardless, and those are important conversations.
Want to have those conversations. Please don't. My father said, trying to squeeze 5 pounds of marbles into a 1-pound bag. As teachers are teaching, there's also all this other work of analyzing data, the curriculum, and writing PAs. I'll keep harping on that until, the house comes home. Teachers really need to know.
Other comment, question? Yes, sir.
Jay Marone, Mount Parnassus Shore. 2 little items. We put a placeholder for learn at $100,000 a year approximately last night in the budget.
Yep.
Forward. What if we were, and I can't speak for the teachers if they want to work through the summer. I know my relatives had in writing curriculum. That money would be better spent on our own teachers, and there's the time, if they choose to do it, for one. And secondly, when we do write the math standards, I want to ensure that our math is going to go to calculus at least in high school. The Common Core standards don't appear to go far enough.
Well, I think the two things are, the placeholder with learn, obviously is in the budget. How that goes is dependent on, and it doesn't say it will be used only for learn, it just simply, that's where we got the data. We will rely on the superintendent to see how best, if that money survives, to use it. But certainly I made mention of the fact that I know that in the last year there was curriculum work done in the summer, and I would assume that was the case. I've never been in a place where you didn't have to use the summers. And as far as the math standards are concerned, I think we all realize that we should be taking our kids to calculus. Those who are up for it, I absolutely do believe in that. I think, you've gotta be ready for that, and that's the maths that are out there in the world. So yes, I would think Strand and the math department and the math teachers know that.
And in order to get to calculus, that's based on a continuum.
Right.
We don't just drop kids in high school and automatically say, no, obviously, now you will get to calculus. It's, kids get to calculus from kindergarten. And so it's about a continuum. And
Mrs. Collins will tell you it starts in pre-K.
Pre-K, sorry, Joanne. So the bottom line is that,